Certainly, lots of progress has been made, and I think it's about getting a balance going forward of what has worked well and what probably hasn't worked so well. I probably spend at least 6-7 hours every day on this laptop. On a Monday in particular, I will spend up to 9 hours or even 10 hours if it's a town council meeting on this equipment, which in itself I find it very tiring, because the stress of watching a small screen, a lot of strain on your eyes. I tend to have far more backache than I used to, and also headaches. So there is that to be taken into consideration, I think, of if you are spending an awful long time on these things, like some of us have to do, there is an issue there. The cost is an issue. I'm not particularly bothered, but I know that my IT cost is quite significant since I've been working from home, and as is my heat and lighting cost. But I'm not complaining, because I've saved probably that more than that in the fuel cost of coming to meetings. But it's probably different for different people. So that is an issue we need to look at, I think. What I do miss is the interaction with people, the cross-fertilization of ideas. When you come to a meeting, you cannot very often touch on something else that you will not be able to in a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting the same. Now, the large meetings I attend, when it's WLGA or the LGA, when you can have up to 60 or 70 participants, it again can be challenging. And Teams I've found very difficult, well, more challenging. Zoom seems to be a very good medium of working. I think there's been an issue of translation with Teams. They weren't able to get Welsh translation for a long time. I don't know if that's been resolved now, but certainly that was an issue. So it did mean that certain people were not able to participate in the language of their choice. So there are those issues that we need to tackle going forward. And of course, we need to consider what will be the effect of working from home, because if you remember, we built quite better very much.
The meetings have become far more professional as the months have gone by. But I noticed again this morning, and I've had a couple of instances recently, where when it goes to the vote and the officer calls your name out, obviously, if the previous councillor has given us a response in Welsh, we get the English translation. And unfortunately, that masks your name being called out. I've had that on a number of occasions, because Councillor Wynne has voted prior to me, which causes the officer to have to repeat your name, which I think isn't very professional. So I did wonder, given the fact that we all know what the Welsh for is, whether or not, particularly in the voting situation, maybe translation could be suspended for that in order to make it more efficient. Just a comment, Chair.
Thanks for that, Councillor Peter. Councillor James Lusted.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn, Sue. Thank you very much. And yes, I'd like to echo everyone's thanks to Sian and the team, and to obviously the IT guys as well, who've worked tirelessly for us as members and officers the same. And I just wanted to echo those thanks, and diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd. For me personally, this way of working has worked wonders for me. I've been able to attend every meeting with no problem, whether I've been working from home or whether I've been away with work as well. So it's been fantastic in the way we are, brilliant. And also when we get back in the chamber, and hopefully we can do very soon, I'll be there.
Going back to partnership working, I have to say I can have regular meetings with Welsh Government, National Park, NRW, Dŵr Cymru. That didn't happen before, because we just didn't do that. We used to make a telephone call or email, and it's transformed my life of partnership working. And I've involved different people from my community in those meetings. And one person, two people especially who are in business, have said, I just want to thank Liz for what she's done in allowing us to come into these meetings, because it's just made one huge difference to you know, their working day, their working life. And so I think, you know, as councillors, getting compliments like that from our communities is really, you know, it makes you feel that the work you're doing is worthwhile. And also, I've had a half a dozen people who've moved into my area, into my ward, over this last year, and they're professional people working from home. And so, you know, I'm a bit like my mum. I want to know where you've come from, what you do, what you do, all this, and amazing what they can bring to the table. There's one lady at the moment, I'm going to meet up, you know, have a Zoom meeting with her shortly. And I think she's going to be invaluable in transport and highways, because that's what her background is. So I just want to say thank you to how Teams and Zoom have transformed my life, really. And my work in the community is threefold, to be honest, to what I was doing previously. Miss meeting up, that's what I miss. Like we're nattering this morning, to be honest. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for that, Liz. So many comments. I think inclusivity, you've touched upon that, Liz, within our communities. I think for all of us, we're missing the face-to-face contact massively. But lots of good points that have come out, and I'm sure Sian has made a note of all of them. I don't seem to have any other speakers, so I'm going to take it to the vote. The recommendation in front of us, members, is that the committee considers the action plan and notes progress so far. And I would thank you at this point for your comments this morning. So have I got a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor James, thank you, and Councillor Joan to second. And members, this again is just a show of hands with regards to the vote, members. So please, members, can you vote? Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
And I'm just going to check with Councillor Anne. Councillor Anne, as I can't see you.
Thanks, Chair. You're the epitome of inclusiveness, so thank you very much for that. And I vote for.
Good, thank you, thank you. I will now take you, members, to the next item on our agenda, the very last item for this morning, which is item 5.3, Public Service Ombudsman Wales Consultation, New Draft Guidance on the Code of Conduct for Members of County and Community Town Councils. And this, members, can be found within pages 106 to 249 within our reports pack. And I believe Rhyn, ti sydd yn mynd I fod yn cyflwyno? Diolch, Rhyn.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Diolch am y cyfle I fynychu bore yma. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to come here this morning and discuss this. It was an interesting, really interesting discussion on the previous item, and as somebody who's gone through a recruitment process on this, who's trying to engage with staff and members on this, I can fully appreciate both sides of the arguments on it. It has opened up a lot of avenues, but I'm really looking forward to meeting you all in person. I must admit that will be a very good day, won't it? So, yes, I thought it was really important that I brought this report to you this morning. It's I was taking it to Standards Committee, but it did cross my mind that really, because it relates directly to you as members and your democratic role, I thought it was really vital that you were given the opportunity to have a look and give any comments that you thought were appropriate. As you may know, the code itself hasn't changed at all. It's the guidance which the Ombudsman is adapting. And I think that comes for two reasons really. The last revision was done in 2016. And as you can imagine, you know, given the world we live in at the moment, things have changed slightly since 2016. And I think there was a need to update the guidance to bring in more examples of different things. There have been certain cases which have come to light and examples, which I think were really important that they were shared with members. So that was the rationale behind the change to the guidance. You will note there are two separate guidance. There's one for town councillors and one for county councillors and fire service and national parks. More or less the same. There are slight differences given the difference in the roles. You'll see more reference to the clerk, I suppose, in the community council guidance, and to monitoring officers and so on in the county council guidance. But they're more or less the same. The examples, the working examples, are more or less the same as well. So what I'm looking for really is your views. I will be collating all the information, so obviously I'll need your permission to do that. But I think from my perspective, I think it's the guidance is for members and the members of the public. So it needs to be clear and ambiguous, give a good indication of how the process works. And I think the amendments have done that. I think that the main changes to it are there are more examples, working examples. I think that's really important because to bring this document to life, you need context. And I think that the examples do give really good context of where people have crossed the line of the code. Also, there's a bit more clarity on the process the Ombudsman undertakes in order to assess whether he's going to investigate and whether he's going to refer to standards or adjudication panels. So I think that's a little bit clearer on this one than it was before. There's a little bit more clarity in terms of freedom of expression, political expression. You know, you'll see the references there to having a thicker skin and so on. My view, for what it's worth, I think sometimes members and officers are quite frustrated about how far the Ombudsman is willing to go. I think we've had examples over the years where you would have thought an investigation would have taken place where it hasn't, and using the political expression avenue to avoid investigating. So that's something that has been discussed nationally, I think. But generally, I think if you look at the flow chart at the end, I think that's a really good working document as to how members see their roles and where and when they should be declaring interest, so on. So I think generally, I think it's a positive step forward. But I really would appreciate your views so that I can relay them to the Ombudsman. So I'll leave it there, and obviously more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Diolch yn fawr iawn I ti'r hyn, diolch yn fawr. Mae gen i'r cynghorydd Liz Roberts eisiau dod I mewn.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Rhyn. I appreciate your support that we get on this, as much as I want to thank all the support that we get from member services and your department, and all the training that we get as elected members, because no matter what training we get, we always learn something new from whatever we attend. And so I think we're all pretty good here as councillors in attending whatever sessions we get offered to us. Now, Councillor Chris knows my feelings on town and community councils, and I want to bring them into the 21st century. I've been a community councillor for nigh on 38 years, and I want to see change. It's been a long time coming, and I want to learn about best practices elsewhere and how we can learn from those best practices. Now, as I read through the case studies in the minutes, and a lot were all having not declared an interest. Well, when you become a school governor, well, since all the changes within school governors, because I've been a school governor for nearly 38 years too, now you have so much training that you have to attend as a school governor. You have such huge responsibilities on your shoulders that there's sometimes I just feel, gosh, I've had enough now. I'd like to give this up. But where town and community councils are concerned, there is insufficient training, because there it's not mandatory that they do any, and I would like to see this become mandatory. And where declaring an interest is concerned, I sat in a community council meeting and I suggested through the clerk that one member declare an interest. And as a new member, she said, well, I don't understand. Why am I supposed to declare an interest? She hadn't been given any policy. She hadn't been given any kind of documentation. So community councillors learn on the hoof how to do the job. And that is something that I really want us to look into. Otherwise, these case studies will continue to come in front of us, because as a new councillor, if you're not given any kind of information, how do you know how to do your role? So I really would love to see changes in this field, and to share this back with the Ombudsman would be marvellous. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Diolch I ti, Liz. Diolch. Councillor Peter Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to follow in the same tone as Councillor Liz, really, because unless I've missed it in the documentation, whereas it says that code of conduct training is mandatory for county councillors, there's no such comment made in the section for community councillors. And members will be well aware from reports that have come to council that the issues that have been referred to the Standards Committee have arisen in town and community councils. So I really do endorse what Anne said. I mean, I've seen examples myself where people haven't declared an interest when they should, and I've had to point it out. So I think that's a step really that would be really beneficial. But I do think also that the documentation really does highlight a lot of examples there that if people take the time to read through, will themselves gain a lot of knowledge from. So I hope, Rhyn, that emphasising the need for training for town and community councils should be made mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Rhyn, wyt ti eisiau dod I mewn rwan I ymateb?
Yeah, os di hynna'n iawn, Cadeirydd. I completely agree. You know, there is a vast network of community councils across Wales, and accessing community councils has always been difficult, especially in terms of training. Given there are so many of them and there are so many members who need training but haven't been able to attend them for whatever reason. And ironically, I think this medium provides us with a really good opportunity going forward to access more members, give them the access to training, be that as a webinar or whatever. I do think that you know, times have changed. I've conducted community council training over the years to clerks and members, and you know, they weren't really well attended. And I think this medium allows that access from wherever they are, and have direct access to training. We have, it's on the agenda for us going forward. Timing will be something we'll need to consider, but obviously I take the point completely in relation to mandatory training. You know, it's something that you as county council members have to attend, have to sign up to the code of conduct, have to do all that. And I think you're quite right. Lots of the examples in the document relate to town and community councils. So yeah, thank you very much indeed for the comment. That's much appreciated.
Diolch I ti, Rhyn. Mae gennai cynghorydd Philip Evans. Philip.
Yeah, thank you. I do wonder, we've got 136 pages of guidance here, which is guidance added on to the code. And I do wonder whether, and reference has been earlier on to members of the councils, members can essentially volunteer who just want to do something for their small community. And I wonder really, and this is just a question out loud. The vast amount of paperwork that's generated that people are faced with, frankly, is it in the longer term going to be a deterrent? I'm going to say, oh, I can't be bothered with all this. And we're going to find a reduction in people seeking to go on to community councils, or indeed the county borough council itself. Having observed these things for well over 40 years, I have to say that the increasing amount of things that emanate from on high seem to increase in a direct reduction in proportion of decisions we actually seem to make. I could write a book on this. I probably will when I retire.
Thank you, Councillor Philip. I have Councillor Chris Cater wanting to come in. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the big game change that we're facing, and it's welcome in some respects, is the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, because in it, Councillor Liz knows I was reading through it last night because I'm meeting with the Town and Community Council clerks tomorrow, and you know, in it there are requirements for community council training plans, annual reports by community councils, the regulations about community council meetings, who can speak, whether members of the public can speak, and how that all is arranged and shared and so on. So, you know, there's a lot about participation at the meetings of community councils, training for clerks. It's there in the Act, and I mean, I know that there will be a timescale to this, and it takes us hopefully towards the election next year, 2022. The other thing is, I don't know whether Sian wants to comment on this, but she went to a stakeholder meeting about democracy, an WLGA meeting, and they were discussing a democracy handbook, which would basically cover a lot of the guidance at meetings, you know, the advice, examples, and so on. Can you just comment on that, Sian, because that's a very interesting piece of work, really, that's in the pipeline.
Sian.
I'm happy to comment. Yes, I did attend the stakeholders meeting. I have to say that I struggled with the concept of the democracy handbook and the fact that it was aimed at very different audiences. So until I get more information, I'm probably not the best person to ask, Councillor Chris.
I have Councillor Harry Saville wanting to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was probably just going to follow what Philip said, actually. I wasn't going to bother until Philip made the points that he made. I think they are good ones. Now, personally, I think the existing guidance we've got does a reasonably good job. The only reason that I'm familiar with the existing guidance, you know, and the vast amount of pages in it, is because I've recently had cause to look through it in relation to a code of conduct complaint. I think realistically, it's probably useful to have a large document like this, but it's there for if and when you need it. I mean, I think if we said to most town or community councillors or even county borough councillors, can you read through 180 odd pages worth of guidance and familiarise yourself with it, it's unlikely to happen. Now, that said, the parts of these two reports I found particularly helpful were the flowcharts at the end. And I wonder if there would be any merit with, you know, having this guidance so it's there if needed, but really pushing these flowcharts as a simple way to understand when an interest should be declared and when it shouldn't be. I mean, I've heard the comments about town and community councils. I can think of some similar comments that could be made about my own town council. And, you know, I'd go as far as to say, I think there's members of this council who don't understand when they should be declaring an interest and what kind. I think we saw it the other day. So those would be my comments. I think the key part of this is this very small appendix at the end with a flow chart. And I'd suggest perhaps if this guidance is adopted, maybe that exists as a standalone that can be shared with members.
Are you making that proposal, Councillor Harry?
I'm more than happy for Green to consider the point and potentially include it in his feedback to the Ombudsman. I mean, unless you want me to make it as a proposal, Chair, but it's just a comment I would make.
Yeah, that I think is sufficient. Sian, do you want to come in on that point? Are you happy? Right, a Rhyn, wyt ti'n ymfodlon hefo hynny?
Yes, I am, Chair. You know, I'll take all the comments that you've made and submit them. You know, I take the point in relation to the guidance, how long it is. It's a difficult balance, that one, isn't it, really? Because the code, if you read the code itself, I can appreciate how difficult that would be on its own to understand. You know, it is a complex legalistic document, which, so I completely agree that we need guidance. Whether we feel that the guidance is too long or not is a matter, I suppose, for individuals. But I completely agree with the flowchart point. I think that's a fantastic addition, and you know, it will form the crux of most training sessions, I would imagine. You know, if you go through that flowchart, it's really clear about how things are done, where they're done. And if you have any additional question on it, you can then refer that section to the guidance itself to get more clarity. So, no, completely agree, and I'll certainly make the point in my observations to the Ombudsman.
Gwych, diolch I ti. I'm going to bring Councillor Anne McCaffrey in. Councillor Anne.
Thanks, Chair. I agree a lot of what's been said. I mean, I personally do welcome the updated guidance, and particularly with examples, I think to help members get it right. I think sometimes when you read a code, it can, in principle, look quite simple, but when you're in the heat of a moment or in a situation, quite often things go wrong, and I think that's what the Ombudsman's caseload actually tells us. I think, you know, Philip, I agree with Philip. It does seem like a tome. And I think, you know, Rena said it should be clear and unambiguous. I think also it should be simple, and to coin the phrase in sort of Daily Mirror speak, because it almost as though, you know, there's 10 words for one word. So I would actually like it to see it being probably condensed so that it's a bit more palatable. And also that it be desktop published in a way that, you know, if a code and guidance can be inviting, that it actually makes you want to turn the page and go into it, because otherwise there's a real chill factor in the sort of the way that it can be presented to you, albeit although it's useful. I think I completely agree with Liz and Peter in terms of town and community councils. You know, I think we all laughed, did we not, a month or two ago, is it Chester Hanford's Zoom meeting? And whilst it might be an extreme example, I think, you know, a lot of us can resonate with what we actually saw going on. So I think training and you know, the need to publish training, and indeed for there to be some sort of oversight, because that I think is absolutely missing, and I think it's actually crucial. I mean, it is something like 3 or 4 years ago that Welsh Government did a huge consultation countrywide. And they've not come out in terms of making any changes apart from the legislation that Councillor Chris has talked about. But we've got, is it somewhere like 700 plus community councils across Wales? I think here in Conwy we've got something like 33, and they go from having hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds to deploy, to having very little money to deploy. So, you know, there is an element of, you know, I think it would benefit from some sort of real change, which is what Liz called for. One of the reasons that I'm really naffed off today, because I'm sitting here on International Women's Day, which is the 8th of March, and I'm in my democracy, my Women in Democracy sweatshirt, which a number of us bought a number of years ago when I was the cabinet sort of lead. And I think it's a really important day for women to be visible. Indeed, the causes that lie behind International Women's Day. I mean, for those of you who have read in the press today, the sort of strapline is about let's all choose to challenge and to call out gender bias and inequality. And it's gender bias really that I probably want to pick up here, because I think the examples in the report are great, but I think, you know, my request is that we call for member references to be gender neutral within these examples. We also, I call for that there is consistency from one example to another in terms of that gender neutrality. And equally, I think that we should call for avoidance of unintentional bias. And I think without sort of overplaying the hand, I think there's quite a bit of it. I have to say, when I read the first example, I was flabbergasted. I mean, we all know that there's not enough women in democracy, in politics, in Wales, in the UK. And therefore, it was incredible to read the first example where it's about a woman. And despite there only being about 25% of women in democracy, so it's a very male-dominated construct. But this woman was intoxicated, she behaved inappropriately, and she brought the council into disrepute. So I thought, dear Lord, what on earth are we doing here? Is this bringing women to the fore? Is this sort of really what the profile that we're looking for? And obviously I'm teasing here, but I think it does make the point very well. There's a complete inconsistency from one example to another as to whether we call the person a member, a councillor, a he, a she, and so on. And I actually think it should be gender neutral throughout, so that, you know, first of all, we're not reinforcing the sort of stereotypes potentially, and actually sort of, you know, putting a bias to one sex as to the other. So, you know, a bit frivolous and a bit fun in the way that I pointed out, but I think there's a serious message here that needs to be taken back. And the gender neutrality is a big one for me, but so is the simplicity of how this is put together and how it's actually published. And really, perhaps a proposal for me, and I made this proposal probably, I don't know, about a couple of years ago and you took it back to Welsh Government. And this is, can we write to the Minister and actually ask what's she doing with the future of town and community councils, because this is still in the balance and still to be decided upon and communicated. And I think, you know, there's a lot of supposition and assumption around what is the role going forward for town and community councils, particularly since now that they're taxing our local communities quite highly because of the lack of funds in sort of main councils, or indeed the ambitiousness of their own agenda. So I think we need some sort of insight into, and I think we need some strong guidance from Welsh Government in terms of the role of town and community councils as well. So that's a proposal. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rann. As I've had the proposal made by Councillor Rann, is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Pat Hebron, I can see your hand going up. So we've received a seconder as well. I have got, before I take it to the vote and to look at that proposal also, I have got Councillor Liz Roberts wanting to come in. Councillor Liz.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Sue. I would just like to echo what Anne says, and I'm really sorry, Anne, I forgot to put my jumper on this morning. But Chris says that he's meeting with town and community councils tomorrow. How many community councils do you meet with, Chris, or are they mainly town councils?
Well, it's interesting that, Liz, because we meet with the town council clerks, but they should head clusters of the smaller community councils. So you should have a cascade effect. So for instance, Ross in Llanrwst should then cascade, you know, the discussions, the debates that we have in that down to various of the rural community councils around Llanrwst. It works very well for some community councils and very poorly for others. There's no consistency there, but it's a good mechanism of keeping contact with them all. We just felt that was a better way, because obviously the town councils, they've they've got the backup more, they're better organised, and they've got more staff and so on. So we thought it was better to just do a cascade system. But yeah, I have to say that some of the community councils in your neck of the woods just don't seem to communicate with anyone.
I'm on 3 community councils and I haven't had any feedback at all via Ross. And I would imagine, I'm not saying that Ross hasn't done it, but I haven't had any clerk mention that he's had any feedback. So I'd really appreciate if you could take that forward in your meeting, please.
Yeah,
tomorrow,
I will do.
because I think that would be really, really useful. I use One Voice Wales, to be honest, if I've got any query, even on a positive or a negative, from a negative or positive aspect. And I find Lynn Cadwallader and his team are really, really good, and they come back to me straight away if I have any query. I was liaising between Sian and One Voice Wales over the appointment of a clerk, because in the rural area we don't get new clerks coming forward very frequently, and so I wanted to make sure that we did this in the correct manner, and we did it by Zoom, Sian, and it worked out very well, so thank you for your support there. So yes, this is something that I shared with Chris. If we have any task and finish group, I definitely want to be on it, because I'm not complaining about the community councils. I just want to help them in going forward. And because if, as Anne says, and Welsh Government decide to devolve more responsibility to community town and community councils, let's get them ready for it now, instead of just waiting for that to happen, and then heaven help the town and community councils, they won't know where they're going to go from there. So I think anything that we can do to make changes for the better now will make them ready for when they have to take on any more responsibility. So thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr I ti, Liz, am dy sylwadau. Councillor Nigel Smith, you want to come in? Did you want to come in, Councillor Nigel?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair. I do apologise. I had to leave the meeting temporarily to speak to Natural Resources Wales. But the Code of Conduct is an interesting thing for me because, you know, it relies on somebody to declare an interest. They don't have to declare an interest. And if they don't declare an interest, and you know that they do have an interest, then it's up to you to get embroiled with the Ombudsman and go against them. And it just seems a bit of a poor way of doing things. Personally, I'd rather do things on a more local level. You know, I'd like to empower the community councils to have the power to sanction a councillor, or maybe even the county council to sanction a councillor, rather than the Ombudsman. Because having filled in an Ombudsman report as best I could with my limited literary skills and time, only to have another email back saying I need to give more evidence, I just couldn't be bothered. You know, so for me, the Ombudsman system does fail, and it fails miserably. So it'd be interesting to see how it will work going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members, for your comments so far. I have one more speaker, Councillor Harry, and then I'm going to take it to the vote. So, Councillor Harry.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the point that Nigel made. I suppose it depends on the severity of the breach of the Code of Conduct, but I'm right in thinking a severe breach can result in an elected member being disqualified. Aren't I right, Reen?
Yeah, correct.
And I mean, at the end of the day, that is someone who has been democratically elected. So really what the Ombudsman can do is, with good reason, subvert democracy. I think probably if that were the case, you would want to have an exceptionally high bar of evidence. You know, it just strikes me as something you would surely want very good evidence before you say to, let's say, a few thousand odd people, you voted for someone, we're overruling your decision and taking that councillor out of the democratic process. Just my thoughts on that point. I see where Nigel's coming from, but I think that has to be balanced up.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. I am going to take it to the vote. I can see, Nigel, you want to come back in. And Rhian,
I was just going to say briefly, Chair, because I don't want to talk about this particular case, but if you had, for instance, a local councillor who was associated with like a local gardening club, who wrote all their newsletters, was their press officer unofficially, but had no official title in the club, and then had the vote and the casting vote on a grant of £1,000 or in excess. That was the type of thing that I put a complaint in about. But at the end of the day, I just couldn't be bothered.
I'd suggest that we just avoid talking about individual cases.
Yes.
If that's
I
okay.
feel, yes, absolutely. I feel very uncomfortable if we start talking about some particular cases. So please, members, we'll keep it to the report and the detail that we have within that report to discuss. Thank you. Rhian, wyt ti eisiau gwneud unrhyw sylwadau eraill?
Sydyn iawn, very quickly. I completely agree on the gender neutral point, and it was in my notes, to be honest. I completely agree with that one, and I think it has been made by other authorities as well. So I'll certainly pass that on. On the disqualification point, yes, it is an extremely high bar. Any such case would be referred to the adjudication panel, and it would be an intense hearing. They're quite rare disqualifications. You know, the suspension powers, the standards committee, and the censure powers are limited. So just for assurance for you as members, yes, very high bar indeed in terms of disqualification.
Diolch yn fawr iawn I ti, Rhian. Can I just thank you all members for your input this morning to the discussion with regards to this item on our agenda. I am going to take it to the vote. What I am going to do is I'm going to take it in two parts. So I'll take the recommendation in front of us within the report, and I will take the proposal made by Councillor Ann and seconded by Councillor Pat separately. So members, this vote is going to be a vote, if you could show with hands rather than electronically. So Sally, dan ni'n hapus efo hynny'n dydan, Sally, just i wneud y siŵr?
Please, thank you.
So members, I'll take you to the recommendation first within the report, and the recommendation is to provide comment and feedback on the consultation and delegate to the monitoring officer to collate and submit a response on behalf of the council. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Ann to propose and Councillor Nigel to second. Diolch yn fawr. Can you show members, please? Diolch yn fawr iawn. And Councillor Ann, just to make sure you're supporting.
Yeah, I'm for.
Wonderful. Thank you, members. That's been passed. Now, members, I'm going to take you to the proposal made by Councillor Ann and seconded by Councillor Pat. And the proposal was to write to the Minister with regards the future of town and community councils. Councillor Ann, do you want to come in to just tweak a little bit on the wording? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add in, Councillor Sue, is that it's in relation to the nationwide consultation some 2-3 years ago.
Wonderful. We will make sure of that.
Thank you.
That proposal has been seconded by Councillor Pat. Thank you. Now, members, I will ask you to show by raising your hand if you're in support of this proposal. Members, can you vote? Diolch o galon. That too has been supported and will go forward. Diolch yn fawr. And that, members, brings us to the end of our meeting for this morning. Can I thank you all very much? I appreciate the discussion that we've had this morning. And please stay safe, and I will see you very, very soon. Diolch yn ofnadwy chi.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Very good.
Diolch.
Thanks, Sue.
Hwyl rwan.